I guess part of the reason why we wanted to eat together is because that's time's really valuable, where you can actually just share a little bit of more of what's going on in your life. Find the people who are also like, yeah, it's been like that for me too. Yeah, I get that. That's really helpful to kind of have those times. But then also, just time to pray yourself, but also pray with other people.
Welcome to Independence, FIEC podcast. My name is Adrian Reynolds, Head of National Ministries, and I'm here with Rachel Sloan.
Hello.
Who is our Director for Women in Ministry.
Women's Ministry.
Women's Ministry, something like that.
Something like that.
And we're here to talk a little about the Leaders Conference, which is coming up in Blackpool. If you haven't booked already, still a chance to go and book. And we'd love to see you there. And we're drawing the definition of leadership quite wide, aren't we, Rachel? So tell us sorts of people who will be welcome at the conference.
I guess anyone who's in leadership in part of their church. So pastors, elders, women in ministry, ministry wives, youth workers, children workers. So there's a whole variety of different.
So if you're
people.
Exercising some kind of leadership in a local church, it'd be great to see you. It's for you. It's not just a pastors' conference.
Definitely.
You and I are going to be hosting the main sessions. You've got a few other things that you're doing at the Leaders Conference as well. So tell us a bit about those. What else are you going to be doing at the Leaders Conference?
Yeah, so on the Tuesday morning, I'll be doing a seminar.
Okay, tell us what the seminar's about.
Complementarianism in practice.
Wow, okay, that's a big topic.
It is indeed.
And you're doing that with Paul Rees, who's Senior Minister here that you work with.
Yeah, so I've been part of the staff team at Charlotte for quite a while. So Paul and I are going to be looking at this topic of complementarianism, but reflecting on what that looks like in our church and hopefully giving church leaders some helpful kind of pointers of how they can think through it. Often we spend a lot of time looking at, I guess, the what of complementarianism.
So the theory.
Yeah.
No more books, please, on the theory of complementarianism. That
would be wonderful.
We've got enough of those, haven't we?
There's some very good, excellent books on the theory of it, but I think what we need to start to help people see is, well, how does this actually look in your church context with the people who are there? And particularly getting elders and pastors to think through, if this is what your church believes, then what are the implications for church
So
life
is it,
for you?
it's not just a seminar for people who have got a women's worker, let's say, because women are doing ministry in churches in all kinds of different places, whether they're paid or not, or recognised or not. So actually it's broader, isn't it?
Much broader than just...
I've got a women's worker, we need to go along.
Or even broader than just we have a women's ministry. It's actually how do we work together as men and women for the sake of the gospel in our churches?
And that's important, isn't it? Because we've got this ethos statement as part of the FIEC. We're a complementarian organisation, but actually there's a range within the FIEC of how that's interpreted. And I think probably, if people say, what's the spectrum in the FIEC in terms of, how people view complementarianism, and I think actually the largest chunk of our churches is probably, we haven't really thought about it very much. That's the category they're in, and this is going to help them, right? Just work through what that looks like in church life. People might come to different conclusions, might they?
And I think that's what we hope people will do, is actually for them to be challenged to go away and think about it, to reflect on the theory and the principles that hopefully we'll share. We'll share a little bit of what that's looked like here at Charlotte, but it is very much, we don't want people to go away and go, well, we must then do the same, because it may not be. Your church is not like our church. And also where you may draw some of the lines from the theory may not be in exactly the same
And do we need
place.
to reframe the complementarianism discussion a little bit, because it tends to be, when it comes down to the practice, it tends to be framed in what is it in your church that women can't do. Seems it's a very negative way of thinking about it. It's not very empowering or valuing, is it? We just need to reframe that discussion somewhat, don't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to recognise the wider range of ministry that women can be involved in. And I think
and must be for the health of the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not may, is it? Actually, this is essential to a healthy church.
Yeah, because I guess part of what we're saying within complementarianism is that men and women complement one another. And so there's certain gifts and ways of thinking or whatever it is where by men and women coming together, they better reflect God's image, but also better work together for the sake of the church, for the sake of the gospel. And if it was only men or if it was only women, there would be something lacking there. And so by actually coming together, and so helping a church look at the whole of their church life, not just the Because again, I think we can think about this just in terms of, you know, certain upfront leadership positions. Instead, we want to say in the whole of our church life, what is the ministry that men and women can all be involved in and do together? There may be differences within that in terms of leadership or whatever, but actually it's a much broader kind of picture that we want to help people see that we need to be working together.
So it sounds like a really important seminar. I mean, it's in a slot with 7 other seminars. So a
little bit of competition.
Well, we're rather hoping that people will look at the programme and say, oh, I'd love to go to each of those. Because actually each of them is, we're trying to deal with, we're trying to deal with some of the kind of key issues at the heart of FIEC. It's our 100th anniversary. We're not going to spend a lot of time singing ourselves happy birthday, but we do want to reflect on what shapes FIEC as a movement. And one of the things is we are complementarian, so we've got to think about that clearly. But we've got some other seminars in that slot as well, so you'll be up against some competition. But we will record them because actually it's such a key topic, isn't it? And we've got to work that through. And I think actually we've left that topic very often to women's conferences and wives' conferences and things, and it's actually, that's not the place to work through it.
No, not at all, because ultimately the way that we again believe complementarianism, that the kind of a lot of the decisions come down to the pastors and the elders, so they need to be shaping the vision, the ethos of the whole church as well, and ensuring that women's ministry and women who are working in ministry come under the eldership.
Right, so that the elders of the church are the elders of the church.
Yes,
that they still have responsibility for that, and they take an interest in it. They're investing in it. They're not just delegating it.
Because there's aspects where I can shape the women's ministry here at Charlotte, but I want to be doing that under the leadership of the elders, and to kind of create a whole church that works together. There's only so much I can do myself, but actually if I'm working together with Paul and the elders, then actually that means that this is something we're teaching the whole church about. And
that's really helpful. I read quite an interesting book the other day on a completely different subject, but one of the things I found really helpful in it is actually the language of delegation is not very helpful in church life. If you sort of take it from the world of business, delegation is, you know, when the boss has got stuff he doesn't want to do because it's too dull or boring or whatever. So he delegates it to someone. He keeps the nice stuff and then someone else gets the other stuff. And actually the language that the book was arguing, the language of delegation as we understand it in the world is not helpful at all.
No.
And he said we should be really talking about empowering people to serve. That's what it is. So it's the elders, I think, as they appoint women to do work in church, it's not about delegating work that they don't want to do or can't do. It's empowering them to do what God has equipped them to do. That's a much more helpful vocabulary, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. Recognising the gifts and abilities that are already there, but giving them the confidence and, I guess, the ability to go and do it well within their churches.
So that's one seminar that you're doing. That's not the only. We got you working hard. You're going to earn your salary.
Yes.
That's not the only thing you're doing. So that's Tuesday morning. So the conference runs Monday. It's 48 hours. It runs Monday lunchtime, so Wednesday lunchtime, and that's a seminar on Tuesday morning. Then tell us what's happening Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday lunchtime, and Tuesday lunchtime.
So straight into from Tuesday lunchtime into Tuesday afternoon, we've got a kind of a track for women who are at the conference. So whether that's, again, women in ministry roles or ministry wives or elders' wives.
So just to be clear, if you're married to someone who's serving in leadership, you're also welcome to the conference.
Yes.
We'd love to see you.
Yes. Okay. So we thought...
And very often, sorry to interrupt you, but very often it is people who are married to people who are in ministry who are also serving as women in ministry in the church. There's quite a lot of overlap. And the Venn diagram has a large middle section, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. So we are going to have lunch together. So Eleanor and I, who work together, we're going to be hosting that lunch. Probably going to be sitting in rough regions, depending on who comes along, so we can get to know people. You're setting
yourself a challenge there. The bar's going to be quite high.
Well, so we could get to know people who are, I guess, closer to us, but just have some time to chat together over lunch, get to know the other women who are there at the conference, because when you're amidst 900 people, it can be sometimes hard to identify people, so it just brings us all together in one place to have that. And then we'll have a bit of an afternoon together. If people want to go to the other seminars that are on offer that afternoon, then they'll be free to do that after lunch. And then the time that we have together in the afternoon will be a bit of a devotion, kind of reflect on God's word together. look at some book reviews, and then just share some of the different work that people are involved in. So we're hoping to do a bit of a question time so people can ask some of their questions about, I guess, what ministry life is like, what is it like as a woman in ministry or a ministry wife, seek some advice on various different topics, and then pray together, and again try and do that a little bit more regionally, because we think, one of the things that really helps both women in ministry and ministry wives is to know others who are in the same roles as you, and actually if that person is close enough that you can not only phone them but maybe meet them for a coffee, then
and men in ministry have lots of opportunity to develop those kind of connections already. Women in ministry not so much. I mean, there are more things now, aren't there, to go to make connections, but women who are serving in ministry are often part-time or no time. They're not paid at all. They don't necessarily have the time to make connections. So you've been doing some other things, actually. Just to move away from the conference for a minute, because we've been setting up some other things to help women in ministry connect regionally. Tell us a little bit about those.
We've kind of started with one in Scotland to begin with, and hoping to kind of find out where the other networks are, but also develop that. So basically having a couple of gatherings a year where we come together for, I think, 3 or 4 hours and just spend some time around God's word, have lunch together, either look at a particular topic or again answer some questions. So we had one last month here in Edinburgh, and really encouraging just to see women from all over Scotland come together with that, from FIEC churches and beyond, to kind of build networks from each other, share how we're getting on, and just find out more about what life is like, because there's a couple of women who are on, so one's from Lewis, one's from Orkney, and one's up in Inverness.
I'm not great on Scottish geography, but I think that's a long way away.
It's a long way away, and for them, they're probably one of the only women who's working in the churches up there on those places, and so actually it's a really valuable way for them to come and chat to women in other places.
So that's really interesting, isn't it? Something you touched on there, because actually the narrative often will be, especially in the medium to larger churches, you might have a lot of people serving in different areas, but perhaps just one woman on staff, or one woman certainly in ministry frontline ministry on staff. That can be quite a lonely, can feel quite lonely and isolated, right? So those connections are really important,
aren't they? And so again, we just want to look at, I guess, hopefully as people come together for this track at the Leaders Conference, we can identify where there are women who live a bit closer together and see if we could do something similar, or get them to encourage them to do something similar in the future. And like I said, it just has to be, once or twice a year where you meet together, pray together, look at something particularly pertinent. So last time with the Scottish women, we looked at the idea of boundaries and what to say yes to or no to in ministry, and that kind of, and it was a kind of really helpful discussion about that.
Are there particular challenges for people who are paid that are different from people who are not paid serving in a church, or vice versa, for people who are voluntary who are not paid, women who are serving in ministry?
There probably are, yes. I mean, I think to a degree, one of the challenges if you're paid is that blurring of boundaries between work and church life, and just trying to negotiate that. So there's, I guess, questions around what am I doing because I'm a member of this church and I would be doing anyway. What am I doing because I'm paid and this is part of my role, and how do I kind of balance those so that everything doesn't just become work, but there's actually some parts of church life where I come as a church member in that side of things, and just kind of working out that kind of balance as well. But I guess then on the other side, for people who are maybe volunteers, it's finding the time that they need. So either they are employed,
they may be juggling 3 or 4 significant roles
in church life, and then have paid employment and have family life. So there's a whole, different challenges in that sense as well, I think.
And tell us, in terms of the track, I guess some people are going to be coming. It's always a way, isn't it? It's going to be a large conference. Looks like it's going to be 900,000 people there. Some people are coming to the conference full of joy. Lots of things happening in church, lots of encouragements. Other people will feel pretty bruised and battered, especially post-COVID. It's hard work. It sometimes feels like a bit of a grind. How do you balance serving such a wide range of people? I guess you've touched on a little bit, we come back to God's word, don't we?
Yeah.
We find comfort in God's word, actually, not in our word. What other things do we need to do to help people, especially perhaps those who are finding life difficult at the moment when it comes to coming to a conference?
Well, I think it's making space for time to chat to people, time to reflect, and time to pray.
This is true for men and women, of course.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think the challenge of a conference can be that you can fill every time with something, but actually, so I guess part of the reason why we wanted to eat together is because that's time's really valuable, where you can actually just share a little bit of more of what's going on in your life. Find the people who are also like, it's been like that for me too. Yeah, I get that. That's really helpful to kind of have those times. But then also, just time to pray yourself, but also pray with other people, I think.
So we've got to be careful, haven't we, that we're helping to put the conference together, we're leading the sessions, we've got to be careful, and we're trying hard to think about, we're not just promoting, life is great, everything's good, everything's rosy, ministry is straightforward, look at all these people who are being converted. Actually, the reality of ministry is, it is sometimes grueling, it is sometimes a grind, sometimes it is difficult to get out of bed in the morning and to get enthused about the pastoral issue that just keeps recurring, or the person who's doesn't really seem very plugged in or is not growing. And we need to be real, don't we, about ministry, and that's what we're going to be trying to do in all our seminars. Let's just say a little word to men. So men who are serving in church, leaders, elders, people who are serving in other capacities. How can we help them care for women who are serving in churches? Now, one of the things they could do is encourage them to come to the Leaders Conference.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other things that we should be thinking about as, let's say, what do you want to say to me as a man who's serving in a church, elder in a local church? I'm married to our women's worker, so I guess I care for her in slightly different ways. But how do I as an elder need to be thinking about how to care well for women?
I guess
women especially who are serving.
Yeah, one of the aspects is looking at where the support network is for the woman. Right. So I think if there's the possibility to go to more than one conference, so come to the Leaders Conference, but also maybe another more local conference. So classically,
people are. It's so interesting. Celia's contract says one conference a year.
Yeah.
She's coming to the Leaders Conference, and she said to me, I can't come to Ministry Wives or to Thrive because I've done my one conference. And I said, I think you've got to make it. I'm saying this as an elder. I think you've got to make a case for. I think you've got to make a case for another conference. And actually, that's going to pay back, isn't it, in church life? Yeah.
And I think it's knowing that often there's conferences for different purposes as well. And so there's conferences where you go and you're being taught and well fed and kind of really challenged. And then there's other ones where you're going to get more support and reflect on life. And I think there's benefit of both of those for that. Yeah. But I think, as we've touched on, for many women in ministry, and I think then particularly if the woman in ministry is single, it can be quite a lonely kind of role. And so making sure that they're well supported and cared for, I think is really important. And so encouraging them to have time to meet other women in ministry, and just knowing that that's part of what they do in their role is building those connections. Yeah. And so, even if there are local gatherings, that the woman knows that she can go to that as part of her time, and that's okay. And if there's,
I guess that's a challenge, isn't it? They're part-time.
Yeah.
So if you work 2 days a week, it suddenly looks like that's a lot of the week gone. But actually, that's an investment churches need to make, isn't it?
Yeah, and giving people permission to do that and know that that's okay. I mean, if they're doing that every week, it's a different story. But if it's twice a year,
you could hop from one conference to another.
But
never do any work.
Twice a year, then that I think will only kind of help.
The sun's come out. We noticed that? Yes. We're in Edinburgh. I should say we're in Edinburgh recording this, which is why there's these. You can just see the bottom of the photos behind us, including actually a Derek Prime. Which makes us think of Dear Johnny and Pray On for Him. But it's nice to see Derek Prime's picture there, and lots of other, the Great and Good and Charlotte Chapel. So the reason it's suddenly gone light, if you're watching on video, is that the sun has come out. But it's about,
it's going to disappear again.
It's going to disappear. We are in Edinburgh, so that's some white, and you can probably hear the bells clanking of the tram as we go past. Now, let's just talk about the conference in general. I'm an introvert, and in some ways, a conference of 1,000 people is like my worst nightmare. And there'll be people who are coming, perhaps who haven't been before, or people who are thinking, shall I come? They've not been before. It all seems a bit overwhelming. So give us a few little tips, little highlights. As a conference attendee, is it attendee, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, someone who's coming to a conference, what's really encouraging about it? What do you find that you love about it?
Singing together.
Singing is great, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, love singing with that many people. And this is potentially sounds a little bit, but it's a different experience singing with when there's going to be, a majority men.
Okay, so it is a majority men.
Yes.
We need to be honest about that. Yeah.
But it just sounds incredible, and it's just a great joy to be able to sing together and worship God with that many people. I think hearing the different people who bring God's word is always encouraging, and just having that dedicated time to kind of just come and think as well. So and what's hard about it? I mean, I guess, like you said, depending on your personality type, whether you thrive with that many people or not. And so I think it's partly knowing what is helpful for you. So again, the temptation can be to come to a conference and think, I have to fill every minute of every
Which
hour.
Some people want to do, and that's
Some
fine.
people want to do, and that's great. Go for it. Network with all the people who are there. Chat to all the people who are there. But if that's not you, then no, it's okay to take some time to go and have a coffee by yourself and reflect over what you've learned, or chat to one person at the coffee time and no one else, and that's okay.
Go and see the illuminations.
Yeah, take a walk. Browse the bookstore.
So we do want to say to people, come and make, if you're coming away for 48 hours, in one sense you do want to make the most of it.
Yeah,
but in
absolutely.
another way, you've got to pace yourself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of content. So actually you do need time to process that, don't you, and to reflect on it. So we do want to say to people, make the most of the time and whatever works for you.
Yeah.
So actually one of our set of seminars is deliberately labelled as optional.
Yeah.
Because we want to say to people, don't feel obliged to come to everything.
No.
But actually, and you might think, well, if the church has paid for me to come, we'll come back to that in a moment, but if the church has paid for me to come, I've got to go to everything. But again, it's a bit like the conferences. The church has paid for you to come and to be equipped and encouraged, and so therefore what works for you.
And I think a good thing to also try and do is pray about it beforehand.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful.
To pray that God will put in your path the people who are going to be most helpful to talk to.
Divine appointments, we used to call those, but that's an old-fashioned way of saying, that would be great. He would, give you that, guidance through His Spirit of what is the right, seminar to go to and that kind of thing. Like I think often in busy ministry life, we can just suddenly be like, oh yeah, it's the conference today, and not really have spent much time thinking about it. And actually, if you're coming with someone else from church, splitting up in the seminars can be a really good thing.
Yeah, and then come together and chat about them.
And in the car on the way home or whatever. Talk about it on the way home, see what you've learned. One of the things about the conference is we don't eat breakfast together. So people arrange their own accommodation. There's two reasons for that. One is people can find something that suits their budget.
Yep.
And whatever they want to do, they want to bring their caravan or tent, they can do that if they want to do. But actually, it does mean that you've got a meal on your own. So if you want to go and have just a quiet meal somewhere,
breakfast is a good one.
That's fine as well. We ought to say as well, and perhaps we don't say this enough, that if you're coming as a woman who's serving in a church, ministry wife, actually this applies to ministry wives as well, I firmly believe the church should be paying for you to come. I know that's not always possible, and it can be a slightly tricky thing. I remember when I was running wives conferences at Proclamation Trust, and most wives paid for themselves to come. The churches didn't pay, and I used to write to church leaders every year and say, you should be paying for this. It's quite difficult for a pastor to say to the church, I think you should pay for my wife to come. But certainly women who are serving in ministry, that should be an investment the church is making. It shouldn't be an investment that individuals are having to make themselves. It's pays back for the church, doesn't it? So Blackpool, new venue. Are you looking forward to that? It's a bit nearer.
It is definitely nearer than Torquay, so it'll be
we worked out it's nearer for a lot of people. We do realise
drive rather than the potential 2 flights that it was on the way home from.
It's not as near for some people. We do realise that. So if you're having to travel a bit further, we're very sorry. But it is a great venue. The illuminations are up, so it's a little bit magical.
I'll take your word for it.
In its own way. And it's actually, not that Torquay wasn't this, but Blackpool too is a very needy place in gospel terms. And we're looking forward to hearing from some of the guys who are serving in Blackpool,
Yeah.
just to hear about some of the gospel need. So it's a great way to be encouraged, a great way to be built up. I think one of the other things you just need to be honest about is that it can be overwhelming if you're finding life very tough at the moment, especially if the person you're sitting next to is singing in the Lord.
Yeah.
Great things are happening.
Yeah.
So what attitude do we need to come with, do you think? If life is really tough, maybe I'm thinking I've paid to come, I'm down to come, but I just can't face it, because actually I think if someone asks me how I'm doing, I'm just going to cry. Is it still worth coming?
Yes, because God will use us, and He will speak to us while we're there. So I think that's probably the attitude that we want to have, is even when we're feeling at our lowest, it's kind of going, how can God use this? And I think if we reflect on in God's word that He talks about the church, both local and I think globally as Christ's body, so each part is important. So whether you're the kind of broken little finger at the moment, you still have a part to play, and actually that might be what someone else needs to hear, and just being able to share with you and talk with you and kind of reflect on what's like God's kind of doing in your life, or what church life has been like. I think that can be really helpful, and so we mustn't underestimate the power of sharing a hard story as well as a positive story. We need to be honest, don't we? Yeah, absolutely. We need to be honest, but I think it's just the one of the real joys and benefits of the Leaders Conference is you get to hear what life is like in other places. I think whether life is really difficult or things are going well, we can think that everyone else is experiencing what we're experiencing. And so sometimes when life is going well, we need a reminder to be praying for those for whom life is not going well. And then for those for whom it's really hard at the moment, I think we need that encouragement from God of going, it's really hard, but I'm still working. And I think just hearing those stories, because again, if we remember that ministry is about what God is doing more than what we're doing, even when we're going through a hard time, we can think it's because it's something we're failing, but
that's
actually,
really helpful. And
it's God who's at work, isn't it? And so
we need to make sure we have that. You and I are hosting on the stage, and we're going to be interviewing people. We need to make sure that we constantly reflect on this is what God is doing.
And so I guess just reflecting on what Paul says in Romans, we rejoice with those who rejoice and we mourn with those who mourn. And and so if you are sitting next to someone who's rejoicing, rejoice with them because God is at work. If someone's weeping, weep with them because they need God's help.
And that's a spiritual thing, isn't it? I think I was very struck a couple of years ago, I did some work on the fruit of the Spirit we put on the website, and very struck how I think the fruit of the Spirit is all horizontal in the context of Galatians. So joy in the fruit of the Spirit is not joy in the Lord, that is obviously a thing. But I think joy in the fruit of the Spirit is finding joy in others. It's knowing how to rejoice with those who rejoice, which isn't natural, actually. What's natural is envy or bitterness with God or with others. That actually that's not my... So actually what we need to be praying for, maybe this is a good way to end that today, is we need to be praying, don't we, for the Spirit to be at work.
Absolutely.
And we often think that in terms of the preaching of the word, and of course we want that, but actually in relationships, in the way that we talk to one another, the way that we hear one another, the way we build one another up, we need the Spirit to be at work, don't we? So that we are built up in the work God has given us to do. Great, Rachel, it's been good to chat. It's always nice to see you. Always nice to come to Edinburgh. Looking forward to seeing you next in Blackpool.
I know, very exciting.
If you haven't booked yet, make sure you book on. If you're booked on, blokes, and there are women who are serving in your church who aren't booked on, bring them along if you can. I think that would be a real encouragement to them and to the church. So if that is possible, it would be great to try and make it happen. That may mean you need to do some creative babysitting or something back home, get it sorted. It would be great to see as many people there as possible. Thanks for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you.
Good to see you. You need to go and walk the dog now.
I do indeed.
In the sun, hopefully.
This
has been Independence FIEC podcast. Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe in all the normal ways. Do look out for new episodes. Thanks for joining us.